When the evening light of Rome struck the marble surfaces, an extraordinary rhythm could be heard at the very heart of the empire. It was not the beat of triumphal drums, but the pulse of a young ruler's heart, driven by an unusual and unyielding love. In 218 CE, from the sun-drenched stones of Syria to the marble of Rome, destiny brought forth a name, Elagabalus. He had grown up as a priest of the sun god Elagabalus, raised among incense and chants around a sacred stone, and now he carried within him a vision too daring for the city's stone walls to contain. To warm the cold face of power with love, to make identity and desire visible at the very center of the imperial court. From the earliest days of his reign, the palace filled with whispers. Rome, long accustomed to living in the shadow of tradition, suddenly faced an emperor who reshaped rituals, reinvented garments, and refused to hide his feelings. The first tremors of this upheaval, later recorded in the margins of chronicles, appeared in the dust of the Circus Maximus. Amid the roar of races under the blazing sun, Elagabalus's gaze was drawn to one man alone, Heracles. The strength in his arms as he held the reins, the ripple of motion through his body, the assured stance that cut through the crowd's roar, all of it carved out a space in the young emperor's mind. For the first time, he felt he was truly breathing. Beneath the gilded ceilings of the palace, the loneliness that had burned within him suddenly eased. From that day on, the entries in the imperial record began to soften. Beneath the stern tone of state documents, a more intimate and personal rhythm emerged. The moment Heracles entered the palace marked a turning point, one carefully noted by trembling scribes. First came the honors, then his visible presence in the corridors. Amid the heavy ceremonies of state, a quiet, determined closeness was woven. As the emperor prepared for morning rituals, his thoughts and eyes found their way to Heracles. By day's end, his steps carried an unspoken rhythm, always moving toward him. Love brought warmth and blood into the stony mask of power. Soon, their bond became the hidden language of the household, in the dim light of shared meals, in the stillness of resting chambers, in glances that mingled laughter with weariness. Rome, for the first time, witnessed so clearly the solitude of an emperor, while he, in turn, bestowed upon one man a title heavier than a throne, yet lighter than love, the center of his life. Official ceremonies multiplied as if to smother Elagabalus's private world. Nobles, families, priests, all lined up to redefine this new order. Yet the stricter the court became, the freer the emperor's search grew. With the sacred stone brought to Rome, the stage of religion was rebuilt. The sun god's priest now wore the imperial crown as well, and these two identities lifted the curtain on a new theater within the palace. Elagabalus no longer saw himself solely as a military or political figure, but as the lead actor of ritual, the choreographer of spectacle, the storyteller of the body. Through this vision, he found a new language spoken in garments, in fabrics, in music, in movement. Over time, the palace nights became unrecognizable. In the flicker of oil lamps, as dresses woven with silk and golden thread emerged, whispers swelled into a rising murmur. Elagabalus, stepping into women's attire, was not merely trying on a costume. He was writing a new manifesto on identity and power. High waistlines, sheer veils, heavy jewels, each detail redrew the boundaries of the body. Taking his place at the center of the hall, he turned the energy he cast over the guests into another form of authority. Dance became the language of this new rule, the soft curve of the arms, the sudden snap of the wrist. Each was a performance of force woven into rhythm. In these displays, the empire was not merely governed, it was reinvented. Guests hovered on the thin edge between astonishment and admiration, and by morning in the Senate and the Forum, the same spectacle was spoken of as scandal. Chroniclers tell of nights when roses rained from the ceilings. The petals descended like a mist, veiling the hall and turning the tables into seas of fragrance. In Elagabalus's world, every gesture carried meaning. The longing to create a moment where splendor, transience, and oblivion blurred into one. Sometimes an unexpected procession entered through the gates. Sometimes silence was dropped into the music like a stone, fixing every eye on a single silken figure. When the emperor appeared in women's garb, the air itself changed. The language of defiance and the pleasure of beauty circulated together. Some guests flushed crimson, others fell into spellbound silence. By dawn, the palace was a machine of rumor, spilling sentences into the city streets, multiplying all through the day. At the heart of this order, only two knew its reason and aim: Elagabalus and Heracles. All the emperor's aesthetic audacity drew strength from a private root of trust. Heracles' presence lifted the weight of the day and returned the courage of the night. In matters of state, Elagabalus leaned often on his silent assent. An invisible map of influence emerged, from the direction of the guards to the rhythm of the kitchens, from the oils burned on the altars to the flowers arranged in the gardens. To rivals, this was intolerable. To the emperor, indispensable. The stony face of Roman authority and the most intimate choice of an emperor had met eye to eye in the palace halls. The needs of state also drove Elagabalus into official marriages with women. Alliances with noble families were meant to secure order on paper, yet the step that shook Rome's sacred pillars was a marriage to a vestal virgin. The union of one bound to eternal chastity inverted the language of religion. To the emperor, it became a cosmic experiment. The fire of the sun god joined to the sanctity of the hearth goddess. This marriage gathered into one flame the Senate's fury, the priest's horror, and the people's wonder. And yet, above every public bond, there remained the one center he always returned to at night, the world he shared with Hierocles. Official vows might fill the palace calendar, robes and seals might weigh down the records, but in the silence of evening, Elagabalus's pulse beat always to the same name. In this world, women's dress was not mere costume, but the sum of a fractured truth. Elagabalus read and rewrote his body like a text, while also rewriting the state through ritual's language. On some nights, he descended to the workrooms of the women, sitting patiently with needle and thread among silks, only to rise later that same night at the center of the stage, dazzling in a bridal radiance fit for the divine. Observers dismiss these shifts as games, but in their consistency lay will, philosophy, and defiance. The message, inscribed even on Rome's hardest stone, was clear: identity takes shape not at the command of power, but through the courage of desire. Such defiance could not remain suspended in air. Factions formed within the palace. Some commanders warned that disorder at home weakened the borders. Some senators shrank so small in vision they debated the empire's future on the matter of the emperor's dress. Even the trays borne by servants carried not only food and drink, but rumors and accusations. Yet in this climate, Elagabalus did not abandon performance. He refined it. He choreographed with greater subtlety, greater system. One night, processions reenacted the marriage of gods. The next, masked figures adorned with emblems of the empire's cities appeared. Each was a new form of declaring his presence. Heracles' position grew heavier in the storm. At first hailed as a hero of the circus, he became, through closeness to the emperor, the target of jealousy. The rhythm of footsteps in corridors changed. Servants held their breath, unsure whose shadow lay behind a door. Guards fastened their armor as if to shield their hearts. The visibility of love had stripped the empire bare, inflaming the palace nerves. From outside, the empire still moved like a vast machine, but its heart beat to a different rhythm. Even when Elagabalus named his cousin heir to preserve continuity, he knew the decision was not truly his. Gradually, behind the scenes of his own theater, he saw the marks of another play being staged. Yet this recognition did not push him into retreat. It urged him toward deeper sincerity. Against the calculations that infiltrated his banquets, he set nights of greater care, greater intimacy, greater daring. His women's attire was no longer costume of a single evening, but emblem of an age. The braid of hair, the tilt of shoulders, the crown's glint, the bracelet's arrangement, all different words in the same sentence, the right to exist. An emperor's love in Rome could become one of two things, legend or danger. Elagabalus's became both. It was legend in the transformations he unveiled in the palace halls. It was danger in how those transformations seeped into the empire's hardest veins. And so, the day of cold-hearted reckonings arrived. In the dark of 222, plans rehearsed in silence reached their final form. Doors shut with the rhythm of a practice cue, corridors filled with the chill echo of boots. For one night, the palace ceased to be a stage and became a courtroom. No judge's face was seen, but the verdict had long been sealed. That night, Elagabalus bore the full weight of his life. The loneliness of a ruler, the fragility of a lover, the insistence of an artist, the faith of a priest, the cost of carrying all these in one body was now at the threshold. Hierocles' name lingered in the stone corridors like warmth in the cold. The visibility of their love had not secured their lives, but it had sealed something else, indelible, that a ruler's story is written not only in victories and wars, but also in whom he held, to whom he turned, and who he chose to be upon the stage. At dawn, Rome believed itself at the edge of a new order. Yet the chroniclers, despite the morning's pale light, recorded another truth that shone through the night. Elagabalus had refused to hide his identity and his love, and in so doing, he had composed a sentence unmatched in imperial history. That sentence was sharp and radiant. To some, blasphemy. To others, blessing. To yet others, the loud utterance of a long-suppressed whisper. Even his enemies had to concede its vitality. Rumor and legend intertwined. In one tale, roses rained from the ceiling. In another, the gods' marriage was reenacted. In another still, the palace breathed at night like a theater. Taken together, they led to a single word, courage, and Heracles' name remained an inescapable hue in that tableau. The calloused hands of a charioteer and the emptiness in an emperor's heart completed one another, shaping the strongest vein of legend. They showed that love's meaning lies beyond titles and garments. Court culture, state ritual, sacred symbols, all were drawn into a new orbit around this center. The scandals Elagabalus created in women's dress did not merely shake social molds, they refashioned the very concept of rule. The emperor now reigned not only on the battlefield, but also upon the stage of identity and visibility. His rule was sharper than any sword, yet supple as a dancer's gesture. Time, like water flowing over stone, wears away details with a patience that cannot be grasped. Yet some details do not erode, they continue to shine. In the story of Elagabalus, what gleams is an unyielding devotion to love and to the self, a rhythm that was never lost in the noise of the palace, an ink that never faded in the cold records of state, a spark that never died in the smoke of sacred rites. Each time the emperor stepped onto the stage in women's attire, Rome did not see just a performance. It saw its own face, its own fears, its own desires. The bond with Heracles became both witness and catalyst to this confrontation. And even when the empire sought to erase that witness, it could not erase the traces it left behind. Looking back today, the pages of history still speak in partisan tones. Some call him mad, some corrupt, others a misunderstood pioneer. Yet when the layers of narrative are peeled away, a simpler core remains, a human being who became both cherished and condemned for refusing to stop being himself. The story of Elagabalus is a rose growing in Rome's shadow. Its thorns may wound, but its fragrance endures. The shadow of Hierocles is the warmth of a summer evening cast upon its petals, reminding the rose of its courage to bloom. The scandals of the palace in the end are nothing more than a manifesto of existence told in the language of one generation. And so, among the echoes of footsteps in the city of stone, the memory of that young emperor still lives, once walking to the center of the stage with silks, jewels, rituals, and love. Beyond thrones and victories, his story tells of a heart finding its home in another heart. It whispers that identity is not defined by the cut of a garment or the weight of a crown, but by the meeting of gazes in a single moment. The shimmering silhouettes of Elagabalus in women's dress remain carved into Rome's stone memory. Born as the scandal of a day, they survive as the lesson of an age. For in the end, even empires bow to a single law. As long as a person refuses to stop being themselves, they truly reign. We hope this video has been both useful and inspiring for you. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and support our channel by subscribing. That way, you'll be the first to know when new content arrives.